Hello everyone and welcome to TV Talks, the show where we take a look at both the good and the bad of what television has to offer. While the next Simpsons season gets underway, I thought I'd do a little bit of a detour and talk about a completely different show, The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius. Back in the day, this was a huge Nicktoon, extremely popular, a lot of merchandise, a lot of very popular online games, and of course the ratings kept shooting through the roof. This was part of the Nicktoon trifecta, the three big Nicktoons on Nickelodeon. That was SpongeBob, Fairly OddParents, and of course this one. They were the three biggest ratings draws for the Nicktoons block, while there were others like Chalk Zone, Cat Dog, or all those kind of things around at the time. These were the big three. But in recent years, Fairly OddParents and SpongeBob are still in the public eye, mostly because they're still going, and in some people's eyes, going downhill, or in SpongeBob's case, slowly improving. It's a long, complicated argument. But because Jimmy Neutron ended a long time ago, and by a long time ago I mean a few years ago, people don't talk about it as much, and they just kind of remember it as a really popular Nicktoon from the Splat era. Remember the Splat? Everyone loves the Splat. I adored this show as a kid, but how does it hold up as an adult? Well, I'll tell you after the history. So this was all set to be Nickelodeon's first all-CG show. They're ready to go with a bunch of episodes and stuff, but then Nickelodeon decided that they wanted a movie to go along with it. So they decided to make a movie. But then they decided, hey, let's put this movie in theaters and have this be the pilot. So yeah, that would make Jimmy Neutron a spin-off show that didn't actually start off as a spin-off. So The Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius, that movie came out, and it was a pretty big hit at the time, but looking back, it's good. It's fine, it's decent, but it's definitely more of a kid's movie, for sure. But everything has to start somewhere, and you can definitely tell that was the start. Not just a bunch of character designs changing like Cindy or Carl, but even some characters overall, some voices, structure, the tone, the writing. Everything changed when the real series came out. And when the series did come out, from beginning to end, it was extremely popular. Like I said, I loved it. And then looking back, it's surprisingly almost better as an adult. Now here's why. As a kid, I, like a lot of kids, liked that it was animation and goofy and wild and had a lot of really creative scenarios. That's totally understandable. Like I said, a lot of kids do that. But when you're an adult, or an older kid perhaps, when you're more in tune to the cartoon world and overall have a better taste in style and writing, you can see a lot of the jokes in here that either kids won't get, or more catered for adults, or jokes that are meant for everyone but still hold up. These come from a few characters specifically. These characters being Carl, Mr. Neutron, and the Principal. Now the Principal's kind of a nothing character, but I'll get to him. So Carl has a lot of medical issues and a lot of really nerd things, and also his really creepy crush on Judy, Jimmy's mom. Mr. Neutron, Hugh Neutron, as people call him, is just, everyone knows about him. He has the weirdest sayings ever. He kind of lives in his own little world, and he and Carl are easily my favorite characters. Even though I really liked Sheen as a kid, but I'll talk about Sheen later. And then the Principal turns out is a very, very over-the-top gay stereotype. I don't know if any of you noticed this as a kid, but I certainly didn't. But then looking back on it, yeah, it's really obvious. All three of these characters have a lot of jokes that are very much tailored for adults or people with more developed senses of humor. But that's not all. For a show that's about a kid with a laboratory and then creates a bunch of random inventions, you'd think this could be a lot like Dexter's Lab, but in fact it's actually not. Dexter's Lab and Jimmy Neutron are actually polar opposites when it comes to tone. Jimmy Neutron is a lot more lighthearted and has a lot more out-of-the-norm stuff happening, while Dexter's Lab, well, that's a video in and of itself. The characters are really well done for the most part. Jimmy can come off as the typical boy genius protagonist, but even then he still has a lot more to him, because even though he's a brainiac, he still kind of feels the need to assert himself and shows dominance and his coolness, and he's also still a kid. Unlike Dexter, who's basically just an adult, Jimmy is still a kid, and he still acts like the way that a young, I don't know, like 6th grade boy would act. Pretty impulsive, pretty irrational, not liking girls. Carl, I've already explained, he's just hilarious. Sheen is the hyperbolic energy nut and just causes a whole bunch of trouble. And he's just that kid, that weird kid who idolizes superheroes and just exists to be insane and make references to the Berlin Wall in one episode. Yeah, I bet no kid got that. Principal Willoughby, tear down your wall! I didn't get that as a kid, but I do now, and it's really funny. There's Cindy, who is Jimmy's arch rival, and before Jimmy showed up, she was the smartest, and she and Jimmy have a huge rivalry going on. I used to hate Cindy as a kid, but now I kind of see her in more of a different light. Because yes, there are a lot of episodes where she's just the antagonist, but a lot of times, especially in the later episodes, we see a more human side to her. She becomes a lot more developed as a character. Then there's Libby, her cool, sassy friend, Miss Fowl, the very strange teacher. The list goes on. The characters are numerous and all very well developed. And there's also a bunch of reoccurring antagonists like Professor Calamitous, the Junk Man, Beautiful Gorgeous, all sorts of stuff like that. The stories are very well done too, especially towards the later episodes. This is one of those shows that just gets better and better as the seasons go on. Some of my favorites include the one where the school does a play based off of Macbeth, and the whole thing is just a bunch of Shakespeare jokes and theater jokes. There are some really obvious jokes like, what would Sheen do if he was given an unimportant role and then messes it up? There are things like that, but there's a whole bunch of Shakespeare jokes, like everyone thinking that William Shakespeare is the custodian, the Macbeth curse, the fact that the whole Macbeth play is just a hodgepodge of a bunch of random Shakespeare plays and barely has anything to do with Macbeth. That kind of stuff. Other great ones include the one where the boys get jobs at a burger joint, and then completely revamp the whole thing, but then Mr. Neutron just ruins it. The episode where the nanobots go crazy and start deleting everything, making Neutron think that everyone else in the world has just disappeared except for him. That's a really, really popular one. The episode where Jimmy has to stay at the Weezers for the weekend. The Weezer family is just hilarious, with the mom that sounds like this, and the dad who's basically just a grown-up Carl. Any time that the whole Weezer family shows up on screen is basically guaranteed to be a laugh riot. I'm not kidding, Jimmy Neutron still holds up extremely well, right up there with early SpongeBob. It could contend toe-to-toe with episodes like Bang Geeks or Chocolate with Nuts. A lot of people probably don't remember that it had this good of writing. I certainly didn't until I started rewatching it a couple of years ago, and I was floored to realize that it held up just as well, if not better, as an adult. It just comes across as one of those typical kid Nicktoons, but it has a lot more to it. The animation is early CG, but they really try a lot of stuff with it. They try a lot of interesting designs, cool physics, and even though it still looks a little dated, it still looked pretty good, especially for the time. So you can definitely cut them some slack. And they also try to make a lot of episodes where you have to watch them more than once to get all the jokes. For example, that Macbeth in Space episode that I mentioned, the one where they do the play, there are so many jokes in there that you have to watch it at least 3 times to get everything in there. Because a lot of them are said really, really fast. So you might need to really pay attention to what they're saying, because there's a lot of subtle ones they don't draw attention to, as well as the big over-the-top ones you're going to get the first time. The writers for this really knew what they were doing, which is funny, because after Jimmy Neutron, they went on to such shows that everyone hated, like Tak and the Power of Juju and Back at the Barnyard. I'll talk about those another day, but it's weird that they went from a show so loved and so acclaimed, and even now, for those who still talk about it, to shows that just never found a fan base. And then there's Planet Sheen. I'll talk about that later. I know I keep saying that, but there's a lot to talk about. The people behind the show had a lot of imagination and a lot of ambition. They really wanted to make this show good, and it worked. And the show was doing very well because of it. So well, in fact, that 2 of the 3 trifecta Nicktoons that I mentioned ended up teaming up. That would be the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour trilogy. So, Jimmy Neutron and the Fairly Odd Parents had a crossover. The first one was pretty good. I liked that one decently. The second one was also pretty good. The third one sucked. And that seems to be the general consensus, too. They put a lot of emphasis on how, oh, the Jimmy Neutron characters are hand-drawn, and oh, the Fairly Odd Parents characters are in 3D, but really that part just doesn't look very good. Because they don't belong in that style, so it really seems out of place. But the scripts themselves are still pretty good, except for the third one, which is just complete garbage. So, things seem really well for Jimmy Neutron, huh? They had some crossovers, they had some good ratings, some really good selling merchandise, right? I mean, who doesn't remember the Jimmy Neutron video games? I mean, I played that Jet Fusion GBA game a lot as a kid until I traded in my DS for a DSi, and of course that doesn't have backwards compatibility. But up until then, I played the heck out of it, so everything's going great for Jimmy Neutron, right? Wrong. Some bad stuff is going to happen to the show. Not something that the creators can control, but something that Nickelodeon starts to control. See, Nickelodeon was losing interest in Jimmy Neutron, even though it was still doing very well in the ratings. Nickelodeon was moving into a new direction, as we all know. Yeah, I think you all know about that. So, in 2005, Nickelodeon decided that this upcoming 2005-2006 season would be the last one. Why? Well, like I said, Nickelodeon was moving into a new direction, and they wanted something that more fit their demo, I guess you could say. Some new things they were going to try out, like Mr. Meaty, the X's, Wayside, stuff that just kind of came and went. Because, as we all know, starting with 2007, Nickelodeon became the came and went network. Either you caught on right away like SpongeBob or The Loud House, and you just stay around forever, or you get one, maybe 2 seasons like El Tigre, Breadwinners, Wayside, and then you're gone. And it was all hand-drawn for the most part, with the exception of like Barnyard or Tech, like I mentioned, which were made by the same companies. But Jimmy Neutron was on the chopping block. They wanted to move on. They also wanted to move on from the Fairly Odd Parents, but then one thing led to another, and then that one stayed around. So Jimmy Neutron had to come up with a big finish-off season to make everything great. And they did! Only problem is Nickelodeon screwed with it a lot. Now, that seems fine, right? No, it's not. Because what they ended up doing is putting in the episodes out of order. Which doesn't seem bad. A lot of shows like SpongeBob or Dave the Barbarian will have their episodes air out of order. That's fine. But not when you air the big grand finale midway through the season. The big finale where all of Jimmy's non-dead villains come back to try to destroy him once and for all aired in the middle of the season. That was the big finish. That was the grand finale. And they aired it in the definitive wrong place. That was supposed to be your capper, the big finish, the big final grand finale for your very popular, very successful show. But no, they ended up making it go out with a regular episode. Now, there's a lot of rumors and speculations on this, kind of similar to what happened with the Angry Beavers, where you're not allowed to say that your show is canceled or something like that. There's no confirmed reason for why this happened, but it still ticked everyone off. But they still got work, and Tack and the Power of Juju and Barnyard came out. Tack came and went within a year, and Barnyard lingered on for 2 or 3 seasons, then jumping on to Nicktoons Network so that they could quietly, well, this is a fitting analogy, drag it behind the barn. Because no one really liked that show, somewhat. That's another topic for another day. I promise I'll get to that one because I have a lot to say about that show. And so they were really missing Jimmy Neutron. The creators were really missing that show. In that one commercial they did for that car company, that kind of satisfied them a little, but it wasn't enough. So, 2010 saw Planet Sheen, the spin-off starring Sheen. That's a red flag right there. You, as we all know from things like Cars 2, never have your sequel or spin-off star the comic relief. That always is a bad thing. Or, if you're gonna do that, make it star Carl. Carl is the more developed character than Sheen. Sheen is definitely just kind of the Mater of the group, really. Or the Patrick of the group. Carl is a bit more of a developed character, and while they do technically have Carl in this, they have a character that is basically Carl, just looks different and has a different name. He still looks similar, acts similar, and has the same voice. They chose Sheen. Sheen was really popular at the time. Keyword being was, because after this show came out, Sheen became an extremely unpopular character, even in the original show. This show started to hurt Sheen's standing as a normal character in that show. What's so bad about Planet Sheen? What happened? Well, the writing was beyond obnoxious. It went from Jimmy Neutron, which had a lot of clever, subtle jokes as well as big over-the-top ones, to just loud, screamy, trying to imitate SpongeBob. I'm not kidding, it really is just like SpongeBob, except for on another planet. Think about it. There's an annoying, weird guy in a very strange-shaped house with his dim-witted best friend, as well as an over-intelligent mammalian friend, a peculiar boss, a grouchy neighbor who keeps trying to get rid of him, and he encounters a lot of really strange, wacky scenarios. It is just SpongeBob in outer space, but with Sheen, and with all the likability of SpongeBob sucked out. Because they're not trying to copy classic SpongeBob, they're trying to copy like season 7 SpongeBob. You know, the one with that sinking feeling and all that stuff. The ones that everyone says is just the annoying ones. Sheen's character may not have been the most developed in the original show, but he still had a lot to him. He was wild, he was eccentric, he was imaginative, he was always looking for a good time, and even though he kind of had a lot of attention problems, he really did have a good heart and really did want to do things with his life. It's just that, well, his kind of instability made him want to seek out other things. And he does have a good heart and he is a loyal friend, he just has very weird ways of showing it. This Sheen is just screamy and obnoxious. That's it. The Carl character is completely wasted because if you're gonna have Carl, have the real Carl. This Doppy guy is just a cheap ripoff. And just because they point out that he's similar to Carl doesn't make it okay. The only two characters I really like are Dorcas, the main villain, who's I just feel kind of bad for, and Nesmith, only because he is the voice of reason to this nonsense. The animation looks a lot better than Jimmy Neutron, I'll give him that, and the alien designs are okay. But it's very bright and colorful and spastic, kind of like they're desperate to keep little kids' attention. It's like one of those shows. You can tell that they're really hoping that the audience is going to stay attentive and really going to focus on them, and it doesn't work. Because not only is it annoying, this might sound a little contradictory, but it's also boring. It's really boring. Now, when I first saw it at the time, I kind of went through denial because this was almost the time where I was rediscovering Jimmy Neutron, but I still had those memories saying, oh yeah, I love Jimmy Neutron. And so I watched Planet Sheen because at the time Sheen was my favorite character. And I was horrified to see what they did, but I was in denial though, trying to rationalize, no, this is from the same people, it's Sheen, we love Sheen, this is still good, But eventually I came to terms and realized it was bad. Luckily, Tough Puppy was out at the same time, so I could still watch that. And then a couple years after that, I was still horrified with the memories of Planet Sheen. I just randomly came across a Jimmy Neutron episode on Nicktoons Network, and yeah, I rediscovered the love for that show, and then had Hugh, Neutron, and Carl be my favorite characters. Not because of Planet Sheen, that doesn't really do anything for me in terms of the old show, it's just that I like those characters a lot more because they're more for adults. Now, I'll give Planet Sheen this. It's not as bad as everyone says it is. Everyone says it's an abomination against mankind, it's one of the worst shows ever. I just think it's not good. I just think it's bad. But I don't think it's like the worst thing ever. It's just not very good in my eyes. I don't particularly care for it, but I can see that how someone might. It's just most certainly not for me, and most certainly not for fans of Jimmy Neutron. So yeah, that's Jimmy Neutron and Planet Sheen. I'll give Jimmy Neutron the Archibald Seal of Approval. And Planet Sheen, the Skeleton Seal, Disapproval. As if there were any surprises with either of those two ratings. For those who remember the show, I strongly recommend you go back and watch Jimmy Neutron, specifically those episodes I mentioned, because they are really well done. There are the occasional bad episodes, but the bad ones are more just kind of, no, that's fine. Every episode has at least one thing to like about it. There are some episodes still that a lot of people don't like that I still like Carl Weezer, Boy Genius. I really like that one, actually. A lot of people say it's unfair treatment to Jimmy, but you can kind of see where Carl's coming from. He's used to being the nerdy, dorky outcast, but now he's given a position of power, and now he really runs with it. It's like I'm with stupid, but a little bit more justified. Episodes like that, which I also recommend watching that one too. Just probably don't start off your revisit with that one. Planet Sheen, like I said, is a no-go. There are only 2 jokes I can remember ever liking, and I've seen almost every episode. I don't know why, I guess I was just in that much denial. The first one would be in the pilot episode, where Sheen says, oh, this is all a dream, I'm just gonna wake up on the farm and all that, and then he sees the characters from back of the barnyard just pass by. I thought that was a nice little cameo. The other one is in the second episode where Sheen has a party and Dorcas has a party on the same night. And then Dorcas is asked the question, if you could go back in time to do something, where would you go and what would it be? I would go back in time to see my birth and then congratulate my mother or something like that. They're moderately funny jokes, but those are the only 2 I can remember. It's just kind of forgettable and annoying after that. So yeah, Jimmy Neutron and Planet Sheen. Word has it that Nickelodeon is trying to work on some new Jimmy Neutron thing, or they're trying to get some project going, because, hey, they're doing some stuff with Rocko's Modern Life and Hey Arnold, so why not Jimmy Neutron? That's what a lot of people are saying, and we've had some unconfirmed sources here and there say stuff, but that's yet to be determined. Personally, if it's anything like Planet Sheen, I think we're good, but if they really do have a good idea, I'd love to see it. Okay guys, I'll see you next time. Goodbye!